Let's talk about the Viceland documentary on the Fabulous Moolah. Been looking forward to this one. It is the final one. This was the season finale. I'm almost positive they're going to bring this show back for a season 2. I don't see how they can't. It's done pretty good numbers. And they've already filmed most of a 7th episode on Dino Bravo, which if they do a season 2, we'll have that episode on him. I mean, there's so many other topics they could explore, from the Jimmy Snuka murder stuff, Owen Hart and Benoit, and you know, even stuff that isn't quite as morbid. A lot of good things that they could cover, and hopefully there'll be a season 2. But with Moolah, the whole issue with her is, here's a woman who for years was put up on a pedestal as sort of like one of the greatest women's wrestlers of all time. And if you ever watched a Moolah match, you know, she wasn't that great. As a heel, I guess, you know, doing heelish things, she served her purpose. But she went out of her way to make sure that nobody was going to knock her off her perch. And what she did in the process was she did more to harm women's wrestling than help it. She did more to hold back women's wrestling than probably any other single person in the business who had the power to do something like that. And she exploited her students financially, possibly sexually, which is talked about here in the documentary. Now, they had people, I thought they did a good job of finding people on both sides of the fence. They found people who liked Moolah and stuck up for her and said it's not right that people are saying all these horrible things about her. And WWE took her name off that Battle Royal last year. It's not right. So they had their Moolah defenders on here, including her own daughter, Mary, Selena Majors, who wrestled as Bambi, Leilani Kai, Peggy Lee, all defended Moolah and said, we never saw any evidence that anybody was pimped out. We never saw any evidence that people were drugged. We don't know where this is coming from. It's defamatory. It's not fair to Moolah, is what they would say. And look, as far as the daughter is concerned, I get that it's Moolah's daughter and she's going to want to defend her own mother, but there is a newspaper clipping, and this was not mentioned in the documentary, but it is readily accessible online if you search for it. There was a newspaper clipping from many, many decades ago, and with the photo of Moolah's daughter, who was 15 years old at the time. The caption is, daughter of slave girl Moolah, Mary Carroll, 15-year-old wrestler and daughter of slave girl Moolah, is shown in everyday dress and in her wrestling outfit. Police of Somerville, Massachusetts, are seeking her mother on a warrant, charging neglect of the girl. Mary claims she was forced to grapple even though she was ill. She was said, at the time, to have had an appendectomy. She had surgery. And Moolah didn't seem to give a shit and forced her back into the ring. After which, supposedly, she wasn't even paid. Her own daughter. Now, this is something that the daughter denied angrily when she reached out to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful.com last year, when all of this stuff first bubbled up. So that's her position on that. But again, the newspaper clipping and the whole thing about the warrant and police being involved, that's readily accessible. I mean, is that fantasy? Does she want us to believe that it's just made up? Maybe she wants everybody to think that she made up the story. I don't know who contacted the police. Seems pretty concrete, though, that something happened. And I mentioned Leilani Kai. Leilani Kai, who was a Moolah defender in this documentary. And she wasn't in the documentary a lot. But at least as far as the allegations of pimping and whatnot go, she was a Moolah defender. But she wasn't always a fan of Moolah. And maybe she still isn't. And the story, and I've told this on the podcast before, the Jumping Bomb Angels and the Glamour Girls. They had a feud going for a while. They had a match at the Royal Rumble, the first ever Royal Rumble on USA Network in '88. Glamour Girls lost the women's tag team championships to the Jumping Bomb Angels. And the Jumping Bomb Angels for that time were awesome. If you've never seen them, if you've never heard of them, do yourself a favor. Look up some of their matches online. They were ahead of their time. Very talented. They don't get enough. They don't get any recognition from WWE these days. So that was the program. They feuded for a while. They had the match. And again, the Glamour Girls lost the tag team championships to the Jumping Bomb Angels. As the story goes, and this is Lady Kai herself, the Moolah defender, telling the story in an old shoot. It might have been an RF video shoot. Now, Moolah was not happy. She was very upset because these women were starting to get more popular and branch out on their own, and she couldn't leech off of them anymore, financially. So the Jumping Bomb Angels go off on a tour in Japan with the Glamour Girls. Moolah knew about this. She called the girls in Japan. She called Lady Kai, and I think it was Judy Martin, who was her tag team partner. And she told them, she said, hey, the office wants the Jumping Bomb Angels to drop the belts back to you guys before you come back to the U.S. Well, nobody could I guess they tried, nobody could get a hold of WWF management to confirm this. So, they heard it from Moolah. It must be true. They went through with it. They did the title change because they didn't want to get heat. So they won the belts back. When they got back to the States, the Glamour Girls got mega heat, super heat, because they put themselves over in this match in Japan, and it was Moolah who basically sabotaged them. And they tried to explain what happened, and of course it didn't work. Didn't matter. Moolah had an in with the McMahons going back decades. Who are they going to believe? So eventually they killed off the belts altogether. They were supposed to have a WrestleMania match at WrestleMania 4. And because of the bullshit that Moolah pulled, not only did the match get pulled, the whole tag team division and the tag team titles went bye-bye. So, you hear stories like this over the years. And it starts to paint a picture that isn't very good of the Fabulous Moolah. You had Wendy Richter in this documentary, Princess Victoria. You had the family of Sweet Georgia Brown, who claimed that their mother was just completely taken advantage of and sexually assaulted, and all of these, just raped and drugged and all of these horrible things. And clearly they are in the camp of not being Moolah fans. And they actually have a clip. I don't know where this clip is from, but they have a clip in the documentary of Moolah giving an interview somewhere. And, talking about the fact that, yeah, it's true. I would take, 25% of what the women in my stable would make. Now, that's 25% off of what Moolah told them they were being paid. Who the hell knows if she was even telling the truth about that? Plus the rent money that she was collecting from all the women who lived at her complex and trained on the property. So she was sitting pretty. And they have Moolah on camera making these comments. She says, I'm sitting here 24 hours a day making you connections with the promoters. All you got to do is sit your lazy butt in the car and go to wrestle and collect your paycheck and your money and send me 25%. And I thought that was fair. So there it is, right in her own words. That's what Moolah said. I don't know what interview that is or where they got that from, and it's a very small part of the documentary, but in her own words. That was the financial arrangement, I guess, that she had with these women. Now, Princess Victoria, who didn't wrestle very long, she broke her neck in a tag team match in 1984. She was laid up in the hospital in a neck brace. Worst pain she ever experienced, she said. She broke her freaking neck. So she's laid up in the hospital, and she tells the story in the documentary. Moolah comes in, checks her out of the hospital, has her back at the complex taking bumps right after. And she said, every time I took a bump, I would cry. It was so painful. This went on for a good 2 months. And then comes the allegations of the pimping. Pimping her out to this guy without telling her that you should have sex with this guy. She didn't actually say that, but Moolah basically said, hey, the nicer you are to this guy, the bigger your payday is going to be. You could really use the payday right now because you're out hurt. You have a broken neck. So then Victoria goes off with this guy, makes it very clear that we have separate hotel rooms. This guy comes into the room, tries to get all over her. She refuses this guy's advances. She gets back to the house. She says Moolah was fire engine red pissed when she got back to the camp. She took back all the outfits that Moolah had bought for her, and kicked her out on the street with $20 in her pocket. And that was the end of Victoria's career. She never wrestled again. And when she left, she said that Moolah told the other women that she was in prison for dealing cocaine. That's why she left. Because, as she said, Moolah couldn't tell them that she broke her neck. And she wasn't really of any use to her anymore, because then they would kind of figure out what the score was. They get into the Moolah Spider Lady story, the first screw job in WWE. They interview Wendy Richter. And here's a thing that really just was like, really? Wendy Richter claims to this day, including in this documentary, she had no idea that it was Moolah under the mask. Because instead of the usual person playing Spider Lady, they put Moolah in the outfit. They put Moolah under the mask, as if this woman wouldn't be able to tell. How many fucking times did she work with the Fabulous Moolah? She wouldn't be able to tell that it was Moolah under the mask and in this costume. Even Victoria said everybody in the building that night knew who was underneath that mask. Now, I don't know what Wendy Richter would have to gain by lying about it, because she insists she had no idea. I didn't know it was Moolah. How is it that I watched that match and I knew it was Moolah? She's in the ring with her. She doesn't know that it's Moolah? Bullshit. I think she's embarrassed. Maybe she's embarrassed. She's embarrassed to admit that maybe she didn't pick up on it right. I don't know. It was just completely confounding to me that she still insists. No, I had no idea. How stupid can you be? So I don't believe for a second that she didn't at least suspect that it was Moolah under that mask. Go back and watch the match. It's on YouTube. It's impossible. Impossible. Then comes the weird ending of the documentary. They go back to this Princess Victoria, who just seems completely bitter, and I guess it's understandable why she would be. But here's what was so weird about this. So they go to her, and after all the stuff that she said about Moolah, the broken neck, and she checked me out of the hospital, and she worked me to the bone, and she pimped me out. She didn't use the word pimp, but she basically pimped her out to this guy, and when she didn't put out for him, Moolah was pissed and kicked her out. Okay, keep that in mind. She says, if I choose to not like her because of what she did to me, that's fine, but you can't take away her history just because she was an asshole. Whoever started these rumors, you're not just calling Moolah a pimp, you're calling me a prostitute. And that hurts. That's what she said. And if you weren't on that property, you don't know what happened and you need to shut up. Now, but she says this after telling a story about Moolah basically pimping her out to a guy and then getting so angry with her that she kicked her out. The whole thing was so fucking bizarre to me. And that's how they end the documentary. It's like, if you weren't there and you don't know, keep your mouth shut. And then they fade out. I'm like, is this woman, like, she got, like, split personality disorder or something? I didn't quite understand the finish to this documentary. But Wendy Richter, I thought, even though I don't buy for a second that she didn't know it was Moolah in that Spider Lady costume, she basically summed it up well by saying Moolah, when you really look at what she did and how selfish she was, she basically killed women's wrestling for a good 3 or 4 decades. She set women's wrestling back for a good 3 or 4 decades. And you can talk about how she was such a big star, and she should get credit for that. Of course she was a big star. There are some really bad people who became really big stars, and you have to acknowledge they were a big star. You know what, though? That doesn't mean that you should stamp their fucking name on a battle royal in 2018 or 2019. It was stupid for them to do that in the first place. They knew these stories were out there. So they got what they deserved with the backlash, social media backlash last year. And I said this before, and I will continue to say it. Of all the people that you could honor by, slapping their name on a battle royal like that, I could think of a whole bunch of different names. But I keep coming back to Sherry Martel. You don't hear a bad word about her. And everybody that she was with, she was there to help them and enhance the act. Randy Savage, Shawn Michaels, Harlem Heat. That battle royal should be called the Sensational Invitational. Honor somebody who deserves to be honored, not somebody like this.